Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma here to Kagurabachi chapter number 117. This chapter is titled The Irashima Talks. And I'm going to be so real, this is my 5th time attempting to record this video. Every other one I've done so far has been like me being like, I don't know where to start with this video, and going on like a long-winded rant about some things that like, wow, there's just so much craziness happening in this chapter. The Uriko E painting that we see in like the 3rd page, or actually that's the 4th page, let me stand corrected, and all of the other random and great stuff we see in this chapter of Kagurabachi and all the intrigue it brings. And after doing that like 5 or so times, I have now realized that, you know what, maybe that's not how I introduced this video. Maybe I just introduced this video by first off saying, hello everybody, my name is Glowplasma, and I'm currently recording this video at 2:35 p.m. on the 5th of April of 2026, also known as Easter Sunday. So for those of you who celebrate Easter, happy Easter. Hope you're having a good day. And for everybody else, well, happy Easter. I hope you're having a good old day, because I know I am. We had a great chapter of Kagurabachi come out about 3 hours and 30 minutes ago. And legitimately, my entire day has just revolved around trying to make the perfect video for this chapter, because there is just so much that goes on here and so many awesome things to talk about that, you know what, I just can't wait to talk about. So we're just going to go ahead and hop in and do it. Of course, firstly, talking about what happened last time in Kagurabachi, and oh my goodness, did we have a crazy one last time, where we got formally introduced to the Princess Soga, also known as Chiaki Soga, who is the older sister of Akimura Soga, the big bad guy, also known as Kunoshige's best friend, pretty much. And also, with all of this, we understand that, hey, Chiaki is almost assuredly Chihiro's mother. I mean, there is no, like, doubt about any of it. Like, we just see how she looks in this chapter, and you can tell she is the mother of Chihiro, and of course, in that sort of way, the wife of Kunoshige Rokuhira. We also learned a little bit more about Rokuhira, or Kunoshige, I'm sorry, they're both named Rokuhira. Kunoshige's relationship and Chiaki's relationship is like they were sort of exchanging all of these letters back and forth, and we understand it a little bit. We also understand a little bit how Chiaki's power works, and we actually do sort of get a little bit more in the first page of chapter number 117, but she sort of sees visions that sort of relate to other things that she has to go and do, and like, she gets these prophecies about things that will sort of befall Japan and things that can help or things that can prevent and all of that various stuff. And one of the visions she saw was of Kunoshige, so oh man, he may have some bearing towards the future of Japan. Oh wow, we know he forges the enchanted blades. Really cool stuff there. And along with the process of that, we learned that in 8 days that there are going to be some people who are going to land on Shokoku's shore, or I'm sorry, people from Shokoku landing on Irashima's shore, and they will deliver a letter and leave. And then a few days later, there will be a meeting with Shokoku's royal family. And we ended off last chapter with the whole reveal of this letter was written in Japanese, and on March 20th, the Irashima Talks occur. Beneath the solitary pine tree on the shore of Irashima, the two nations meet to discuss the rights to mine the Danseki. And that's what happened last time in Kagurabachi, as we open up this chapter, again, number 117 by Takeru Hokuzono, with a little bit of narration about how Chiaki's ability really works. The gift passed down through the esteemed Soga clan lineage usually foretold on an impending national emergency through a vision of fragmented images. It can predict the time and place of an event, but not the specific number of casualties, specific damage, or any other impact. The prophecies allowed those in harm's way to evade death and alter the outcome of the event. And we see that Chiaki is sitting here. It's the same exact image that we saw last time of her sort of reading off the prophecy and these carpets sort of like obscuring her face from view of everybody around. And we see an image of a bald man here in the moment. We will actually see this person again towards the end of the chapter. We'll see they sort of have more of this sort of large beard, and they've got this very interesting, I honestly don't know what to call it. I tried looking this thing up, but I couldn't find anything about it. We see that it's sort of like a 3 sort of like strips of like, I'm guessing like wood paper or something like that. Not necessarily a cloth because it got more of a rigid structure attached to a rope which is draped around the back of this person's sort of being. And along with that, it sort of makes this very interesting, like almost like behind helmet shape for this guy. Again, I tried to look up what one of these things is called, and I just couldn't find anything. But we see this person's image here in the moment, and we also see that they've got this sort of cloth sort of hanging down from the center forehead of their face, dipping down in between their eyes, and sort of like a circlet or two strings of beads that sort of go from the middle of the circlet all around to like behind their ear. And we just see this visage of this person here in the moment through the like images and prophecies that Chiaki is getting. As Chiaki just says, the upcoming meeting will be extremely hostile. As in, we cut over to the island of Irashima, where we get the chapter title number 117, The Irashima Talks, as we also get a little bit of narration as well. In the 2 years since the appearance of Shokoku, the only interactions with the people of Shokoku were skirmishes on Irashima. During these altercations, they attacked from afar and avoided direct engagement. Everything about them remained shrouded in mystery. As we then cut over to some place in Japan overlooking the mountains and the sea, as we see a sorcerer is sitting here in a wheelchair, and we see that he has both of his legs amputated right underneath the knees, and he's sort of sitting here in like one of those white like hospital robes, and he's sort of like holding out his hands like mimicking his like, it's almost like he's getting interviewed here in the moment. It's a very like weird spot for him to be in, but as a broadcasting student in college, like I can tell this would be a pretty good interview setup shot. You know, I mean, it sort of looks like we're getting like rule of thirds here. It sort of also looks like he is set up properly, framed, sort of looking at the interviewer who would be standing next to the counter or standing next to the camera in this case. But either way, this amputeed sorcerer is just, oh, well, I was sent by the sorcery bureau as part of the security detail to accompany a government expedition. We were the first group dispatched to Irashima since Shokoku's appearance. I was also the first person to fight them in close combat, and I was also the last. We were this close, as he sort of holds out 4 fingers in front of him, sort of like tucking the thumb behind the palm of his hand, and he's like, we never spoke, but when I saw them, I somehow knew that they were Japanese. Of course, which is very interesting, being that we learned last chapter that the letter was actually written in Japanese that the people from Shokoku left on the beach of Irashima, right? But we will be getting much more on this here in the upcoming pages, so not really much to dwell on now. As we then cut over to a researcher, sort of like here, I'm guessing he like works with the like University of Tokyo or something like that, as we see just like books all over this guy's room and all of these bookcases and just scattered all over his desk, like typical old guy. We see that he's sort of sitting here. He has a like a shirt and tie on, like a long sleeve collared shirt and all of that, and like what looks like to be a black vest over it, and then like a coat over top of all of that, and of course the glasses that sort of have the attachment to let it hang around your neck pretty much. As we see this researcher is sitting here, and we'll also understand here in a few minutes that Hasumi from the Sorcery Bureau is also in here sort of talking and getting information out of this dude as well. As the professor is just saying, so an island suddenly appears in the southeastern seas. It's secretly inhabited by the Japanese. And Hasumi says like, hey professor, we only know that they appear to be Japanese. There's really no way to be sure. And the professor's like, no, I have a hunch. And as the professor's sort of going through and trying to explain all of this, we then flip the page to the 4th page of the chapter. And whenever we do, we see a very interesting image. Honestly, one of the most shocking page turns I've ever had while reading manga, as we see an ukiyo-e painting here in the moment, drawn by Takeru Hokuzono. And for all of us who don't know what an ukiyo-e painting is, including me from about 3 hours and 30 minutes ago, this is a genre of Japanese art that flourished from the 17th through 19th centuries. Its artists produced woodblock prints and paintings of such subjects as female beauties, kabuki actors, and sumo wrestlers, scenes from history and folktales, and travel scenes and landscapes, flora and fauna, and also erotica. The term ukiyo-e translates as pictures of the floating world. And that is just the excerpt from the Wikipedia article on the ukiyo-e sort of genre of Japanese art. And honestly, it's just such an interesting thing. Like, it's drawn in that classic style of, like, it's honestly so hard to explain, but, like, very sort of, like, simple facial structures, honestly, like, a little bit of, like, big and bulbous in that way. Like, everybody knows it whenever they see it, but not everybody knows the term, pretty much. And as we see, this is a completely original artistry for this series, as it represents the story of the Soga clan. Of course, as we just read in that description, it also gives scenes from history and folktales, which is what we are seeing here. As we see a man named Ukima Soga fighting this person called Mikaboshi, who really looks like a stereotypical demon from all sort of like Japanese old art, pretty much. We see they've got sort of like these two arms here and sort of like lunging forward towards Umika, who has dual swords on his hip. And we also see like he's got like this very big mouth with like almost like this gaseous like force coming out of it, this very big, long, flowing hair, and what also seems to be this very big cloak sort of almost representing the night sky, along with what seems to be sort of a flowing river water here in the panel as well. It's just a very beautiful little art piece, and it's so intriguing is like, wow, Hokuzoto really drew this for the manga. Like, this is just so cool getting a look into this version of Japan's history, right? And in the process of all of this, the professor starts to sort of explain what we are seeing here in this panel. That long, long ago, more than 1,000 years back, this land was ruled by a clan of sorcerers. And they were known as the Mikaboshi. Of course, the sort of tag for this demon that we see in this chapter. And as we sort of get a closer up look on the Mikaboshi's face, we see that they've got this almost tattooed insignia on their forehead. And along with that, we also look back over at the image of the Mikaboshi and Umika Soga, the story of the Soga clan, as we start to see this tattoo on the Mikaboshi's head looks like a centipede. And also, there are centipedes crawling around on the Mikaboshi in the story of the Soga clan as well. The professor just continues, the Soga clan defeated them, but to this day, sorcery remains a strong underground influence in our society. And we now see that Hasumi is the other one in the room, as Hasumi's just like, well, I've heard of all of this, of course, but how is all of this sort of related together? As the professor just explains, well, according to the legend, the Mikaboshi were driven in the present-day Chiba and wiped out. And of course, Hasumi's like, oh, so Chiba, southeastern Japan. Are you suggesting that they actually survived and their descendants now live on the Isle of Shokoku? Like, that's a huge leap, even for you, Professor. As the professor's like, yes, and there is more. As we then cut back out to the Amputee Sorcerer, who's like, well, yeah, they were extremely powerful. Like, I was defeated with their sorcery. They controlled something like insects. As the professor continues to describe, there are various accounts of the Mikaboshi. I mean, they said that they stand over 2 meters tall, this or that, have black claws. But the most pervasive story is that the Mikaboshi have the power to command insects. And of course, at this time, Hasumi is before the enchanted blades ever existed, and we know the Makatsumi's ability is revolving around insects and sort of the malediction, the growth and stealing of vitality and life force, right? And this is just a very interesting thing as a member of the Soga clan later on, Akemura, going through and somehow ending up with an ability very reminiscent of these Mikaboshi, who seem to be now the inhabitants of the Isle of Shokoku, which it's just such a little bit of an interesting thing here, right? But also something else I want to bring up is, as we learned in chapter number, 113, whenever we were listening to the Goggles Sorcerer, and who had sort of had that swim cap on and all of that various stuff, he pretty much explains, like, hey, whenever I saw all of these Shokoku Islanders, they appeared to be human, but not like ordinary sorcerers. And of course, we got the one panel on the bottom of page 5 that we sort of see like the eyes of a Shokokuin, and that's sort of all we see. But it also looks like a lot of the community thought that it looked like they have gills on their neck pretty much. So of course, making sense that they are sort of more of like this aquatic species or something like that. And later on in this chapter, just to spoil it, we will see a few of the people from Shokoku, or Shokokuins, as I'm just going to continue to call them from now on. And while they do appear to be Japanese, very similar to everybody else who we have seen in this series, at no point do we ever see any of their necks, which is a very interesting thing. So maybe those sort of like brief images of the people that the Goggle Sorcerer saw didn't have, or they had gills, but as we're sort of understanding, this person here, this Amputee Sorcerer, is like, oh, they were Japanese. Like, so because of that, it could be that all of the Shokoku people actually cover up their neck because they are from under the water pretty much, right? And in the process of that also leads me to believe that, like, thinking of all of the characters in Kagurabachi, like, we know what mostly everybody's neck looks like, right? Yura, he doesn't have gills, like, that's not his thing. But you know whose neck we have never seen? It is the best genus Hishaku guy. I've called him Talo in the past, other people call him Derek Hishaku. Many people have many different names for this guy. But we have never seen his neck, and sort of as you'll go later on in this chapter looking more at this, I wouldn't be surprised if he's actually from Shokoku and a true Shokokuin, a descendant of the Mikaboshi pretty much, right? But either way, as we sort of get this reveal about all of the insects and the intrigue of like, why is Soga commanding insects, but the people he didn't like, the people he wiped out, they also controlled insects? Something seems a little bit weird here, a little bit off, but we'll of course be learning that in time going forward, if I had to guess, right? But either way, Hasumi just sort of continues talking to the professor, and he's like, so hypothetically, let's say the people of Shokoku are descended from the Mikaboshi. And if so, they were driven off the land and into the ocean, where they lurked for over a millennium and developed their own civilization. And the professor's like, no, that would be impossible, unless they were aided by a bizarre force beyond our understanding. And Hasumi's like, a bizarre force beyond our understanding. And the professor's like, yes, right. We're looking at it right now. This Dainseki, I understand it exists on Shokoku as well. And Hasumi's like, yes, theoretically. We estimate the vein on Irashima contains about 80 kilos of the material. And when we calculate the total amount on Shokoku based on the levels of radiation that the Dainseki emits, even accounting for the interference of the force field, there must be like at least 1,000 kilos. And I find the biggest, most interesting part of this that I sort of really cling to isn't the whole idea of like, hey, 80 versus 1,000, like as Hasumi is about to sort of say, like Shokoku has 12 times the amount of Dainseki that is found in Japan. But more than that, radiation levels. Of course, there's been a big allegory in Kagurabachi of all of the enchanted blades as legitimate nukes, pretty much, right? That come through and just destroy everything about them, nuking the land of Japan, leaving just flower fields and craters in their wake, pretty much, right? And this sort of helps out the allegory a little bit more, being like, oh yeah, radiation levels of Dainseki. You're looking at the hydrogen bomb, radiation levels, all of this other various stuff. Probably something put in there by Hokuzono just to sort of add to that allegory. But I also love that as a way that you can sort of track the Dainseki and sort of estimate the whole ideas of oh yeah, we look at the radiation through Geiger or whatever sort of all of that variousness is, and we sort of aim it in certain directions, and we see how this material is radioactive. I don't know, does the Dainseki have a half-life of any kind? Does it deteriorate over time? What type of material is a Dainseki? It's just so interesting, and this little bit of a radiation level sort of adds to the intrigue a little bit of apparently it's not that radioactive to be very harmful for people just holding it. But also, It apparently emits still a surface level amount of radiation, which is just fairly interesting. Now, I'm not a nuclear engineer. I don't know really much about how different materials shed off radiation. You know what? I actually do have a friend. I may call him later and try to see. Maybe I'll talk about it in next video or something along the lines of that, but still just bloody interesting, right? Well, either way, Hasumi then just gives a line of they've got 12 more times the Danseki than we do, pretty much. As the professor's like, okay then, well, here is my theory. Mikaboshi's descendants are the inhabitants of Shokoku. Over the course of 1,000 years, they created their own civilization aided by the Danseki, a force beyond our very understanding. And at that point, we then cut away to 12 p.m. on March 20th. The appointed time of meeting for the Irashima Talks, as we see that the Japanese delegation arrived on Irashima in an ironclad ship, as we sort of see in the background this big naval vessel that brought all of these delegates to the island of Irashima here, and then a small wooden rowboat that it looks like the three of them sort of rowed over to the island. And we see this one man here who, of course, seems to be the lead delegate. He's got this, very fancy comb-over haircut, pretty much. And we see that he's also got, a fedora in his hand is what it looks like. Almost very reminiscent of Hatshaku. And he's sort of, holding that to his chest as he's very just, sharply dressed. And the two men behind him are both wielding katanas. Of course, it seems like they are more of the we're here for protection type people. This man is here for the actual talking. And as we sort of see this, the main delegate's just wow, a table and seating, how thoughtful of them, pretty much. However, they aren't here yet. As he sort of goes and looks around, as we cut back over to this professor who's on the phone with Hasumi. And we see the professor's I see, so in the letter from Shokoku, and Hasumi's yes, this clinches it. As we take a look at the note scroll that was left on the beaches of Irashima 8 days ago by the people of Shokoku who landed on the Japanese shore, pretty much. And we see it's just a little bit of a letter, and that we see at the very end of chapter number 116. And as we see that Hasumi is going through and reading it, he sees in the bottom left-hand corner, of course, the end of the letter, a symbol, a centipede. It is the same exact centipede and image that was on the Mikaboshi's head, and also that describes the Mikaboshi as a people. And on the other end of the cell phone line, the professor says, and with that knowledge, the government intends to proceed with the meetings? As Hasumi is yes, with all that being said, the prophecy warned that they would be hostile, but nonetheless, that's all the more reason to forge ahead. If we refuse to talk, the only path left is war. And on behalf of the Sorcery Bureau, the best thing we can do is send the strongest defense detail that we have. As we just see that the delegate is sort of looking over it is time for the meeting, isn't it? And as he's sort of looking all around, there's an explosion in the background. As on the phone, Hasumi is still talking to the professor. The professor just says, well, I'm sorry, but I will be leaving Tokyo briefly. The Mikaboshi, Shokoku, have monopolized the Danseki for ages, and now a geological phenomenon has caused it to surface on Japan's terrain. Perhaps even the Danseki is holy to them, and they don't want Japan to have it. There are various possible reasons, but at this rate, a clan that was once abolished has reemerged wielding tremendous power. As the delegates turn around in response to this explosion, as they look at their giant iron ship in ruins, exploded and sinking to the bottom of the sea. And as they sort of go over and look at this, the main delegate's what's going on? As he turns around in the moment, and we see a few Shokokuans standing here, as the professor just continues on with his little bit of a speech. Based on the aggression we've experienced on Irashima, it is clear to me why they've come. As the delegate turns around, and rising out of the ocean is only what I can try to describe as a shell transportation device or something like that raises out of the ground behind these 5 men who have stepped forth on the Isle of Irashima. And this sort of like shell thing is very interesting because it's got like many sort of like traditional Japanese ropes tied onto it with these ends that are sort of like blowing and like just blowing around, tussling in the wind. And as all this happens, we get a good look at who these people are. One of them is the person who Chiaki saw at the very beginning of the chapter, sort of in this vestige. And as we sort of got described last chapter, I'm guessing that this is sort of like the main royal family guy of Shokoku, sort of. Just the way he's sort of standing here and how all of the other 4 people next to him. It's honestly pretty funny how there are 2 tall ones and 2 short ones. The 2 shorter ones are on either side of this man who is also sitting in a chair that seems to be floating off of the ground. And we see that his legs are way too puny to even reach the floor at all. And then on either side of the 2 shorter men are 2 bigger men, all sort of wearing the same sort of overall headcut, what am I talking about? Haircut. And also they have these large sort of, like neck braces plates going over their necks. So of course they're obscured, leading to my theory earlier of that these people probably have gills at the end of the day. As all this happens, the delegate also sort of looks around and looks back over to the couch, where we now see another man is sitting here, and the 2 sort of defense detail agents are cut down, bloodied on the ground, as their blood is just pouring out of all of them, and the delegate says like, oh my gosh, like, what's going on here? As this other man is now sitting on one of the couches, and we see that he sort of has this arm brace on, this sort of arm guard. And more importantly, he has something that I have known about for the longest time in my life. I mean, we've all seen them in sort of like military and very political images as like parts of their sort of uniform. But I never knew what one was called, as it's an agulette, which is this sort of rope that goes from one shoulder clinching on to not quite the other shoulder, but more sort of like the breast area somewhere around there. And we see that this man is sort of holding one of them and has this very high jacketed shirt on that has this high collar that sort of goes right up to the earlobe of this figure pretty much. And we see that he's sitting here, very greased back hair and a few strands that sort of have made its way down into his face, and these very black eyes with almost what seems to be cracks emanating out around them on both of his eyes. And he sort of sits here and holding one hand very close to him, he goes out and holds his left hand out, sort of just palm up, sort of like making a sit here, please, friend sort of gesture. And we also see that his nails are painted here in this image as well. As this guy, who seems to be the more delegate person of the Shokokuian people, I'm guessing that his role is probably going to be of the prince of Shokoku, maybe? Maybe sort of the people around him are his father or just like other people of the Shokokuan royal family court. And this guy is like the prince, maybe not the current ruler, but the next ruler to be, or just a young ruler in general, because he does look Japanese and pretty young at the end of the day. As this man just sort of reaches his hand out and says, "Deep breaths, sir, we will be needing you." As the delegate from Japan is sort of freaking out and sits down across from this Shokokuian at the table. And at this point, we just get a little bit of narration as the Shokoku issued the following demands. Japan must hand over Irashima. Japan must relinquish the Danseki extracted from Irashima. And moreover, Japan must cede Chiba, Kanagawa, and Tokyo, areas that could yield Danseki veins in the coming millennia. And we just get all this while looking at the lone pine tree here on the island, as the delegate's just like, "No, but that's preposterous, we couldn't possibly," as behind the delegate, his ship burns in the background, sort of like leaving him stranded here, as the Shokokuian man just says, "Well, I believe we've made ourselves clear. No compromises. If you refuse, we will use excessive force." And he sort of takes this document and slides it over to the Japanese delegate. But as he does, a hand goes and stops the paper in its tracks, putting it on there. And the Shokokian sort of pulls up the hand and sort of like a little bit of like, oh, what is this? As we get a little bit more narration. 4 sorcerers were aboard the spirit energy-powered armored ship, the Haruma, which had been destroyed moments earlier. Hiroto Soga, Togo Shiba, Yoshinogo Soga, and Shuji Mashiro. They were the smallest yet strongest squad selected by the Sorcery Bureau for this mission. As we then get an image of all of these people, as we see that it was Shiba's hand that stopped the document moving in its tracks. As Shiba just says, guys, go home, please. As we get a look at also these 2 brand new characters as well, of course, like we know who Mashiro is, we know Shiba, but also we get introduced to Hiroto Soga and Yoshinojo, or how do we say that? Yoshinojo. Yeah, Yoshinojo Soga as well. And Yoshinogo seems to be this sort of very old man here. The moment we see that he's got like this big goatee and this beard sort of reaches up and forms also a mustache. It sort of isn't complete, but still sort of gets the point across, and he's just like flashing this big smile like, I'm ready to beat all of you up. And also this Hiroto guy who seems to have all of these tattoos on the left side of his neck, and one eye is of course obscured, and the other one is looking down very like, you are beneath me sort of type guy to the Shokokian here in the moment. As we then go to the final 2 pages of the chapter, where we get this double-page spread of just all of these characters standing around here. We see the Shokokian delegate on one couch, the Japanese delegate on the other couch. Shiba is also sitting on the couch as well. Mashiro is right beside the delegate. And on either side of the table are Hiroto and Yoshinojo. As we just get the narration that at 12:02, the talks dissolved due to a preemptive strike by Shokoku. And thus, the battle on Irashima began. And that's where we end this chapter of Kagurabachi, chapter number 117. And the thing about this final panel that we get here is I love how sort of the tree is on one side of the battlefield and how everything is sort of more leaning heavily over on the side of the Japanese delegate. And on the other side, the Shokokian is just sitting here, his greased back hair sort of just behind him. And he just has like one of his hands, I think that's what his right hand is just like sort of fiddling with his collar. And the other hand is just like resting on one of his knees that he has crossed over the other one. Like almost this guy doesn't care. He knows what he's made of. And thus it seems here is really where the Seitai War begins with this battle, this scrimmage, this whatever we're calling this on Shokoku. This is the invasion of Poland that really just gets the ball rolling, you know? And along with that, this chapter is just so interesting. From the initial moment that, I mean, really from the first moment we open up this chapter and see this weird bald guy, because, like, we don't really see this guy throughout the rest of the chapter. We see him once whenever he's sort of there with this, like, elite squad of guys who honestly have the same hairstyle as Isami pretty much, and this sort of, like, shell ship behind him is sort of what I want to call it, but also I don't know, it could just be, like, a weapon of mass destruction. Like, we see there's a giant hole in the side of it, like, who knows, man? That could be like a cannon. Like, it could be like a Sero from Bleach, you know, just like a big energy weapon. Or, you know, maybe it's just like pure Dotenseki and it's just going to like fire off war blasts or something. Like, I don't really know. But we also don't see what's going on with them as the delegate sits down and talks to this other man. And it really doesn't seem like Shiba, Hiroto, Yoshinojo, or Shuji are really paying attention to what is going on with them either. So that's something to look out for next chapter. But, I mean, we're going to be continuing with this conflict next chapter. There's absolutely no way that we won't, unless we go over to Kunishige, in which way we will. So, you know what? No one Hokuzono, there's about a 50-50 chance of what we're going to be tackling next chapter of Kagurabachi. But really going to probably my favorite part of this chapter is the description of these people from the former sorcerer Amputee. As, like, I just find it so interesting that, like, why is he sitting here in a wheelchair? Like, is he getting interviewed? Like, just what's going on with this man? Was somebody like pushing him around and Sheba came up and started to like talk to him or Hospi or somebody like that? And his like wife or whatever's just like, oh, I'm sorry, honey, I'm gonna sit you right here so you can talk to these very important men and I'm gonna go away somewhere. And just the whole idea that they were Japanese really leads into this whole idea of the Mikaboshi. And most importantly in this chapter, I think, like the takeaway that everybody sort of needs to be looking at and sort of forming a theory on, in my opinion, is if the Mikaboshi are people that love to control insects, or not, I'm not going to say love to, but they have the ability to, why in the world, just, like, why at all does Soga's ability work with manipulating insects as well? Does the Danseki have something to do with this? Was it an old resource that's just not written about in the history textbooks or something like that was around and the Mikaboshi were using it during that time and the Soga clan just didn't know it? They thought their sorcery came from some other ability. I mean, honestly, if we think about it, the Danseki may be where sorcery originated from, and the body over time learned how to sort of produce its own spirit energy like the Danseki does, and eventually decide to like make that part of the body itself through evolution or something. Like, who really knows? But also just how does Soga's ability come from the Mikaboshi is my main question right now. I really hope it isn't sort of the thing of like, oh, he killed so many of them, he got their power now. That sort of seems like a little bit of a weird thing. And what I'm sort of guessing right now is that the Mikaboshi use Danseki, and Danseki sort of has some like way to talk back with nature almost in a way. Granted, like the enchanted blades we've seen so far, like I would say only really 3 of them have sort of like the ability to affect nature in any sort of way, and mainly that'd be Magatsumi and the Cloud Gouger, one of them which is weather-based. Weather is like an element of Mother Nature, and plants and animals and vitality and all of that is more of a part of humans, and that's where I also say that Kumeyori would probably work into this as well, as Kumeyori sort of affects humans through the idea of like Banquet, which makes them all woozy and stuff like that, right? But either way, I think that just the most powerful enchanted blade sort of like channeled the idea of what the Mikaboshi did. Maybe, honestly, it's a theory that I really haven't worked out that much, and the more I talk about it, the more I think I don't know how to quite put it in the words that I'm thinking. But either way, crazy chapter of Kagurabachi. There's just so much interesting things going on here, and I mean, it would have been easy for Hokuzono to be like, oh yeah, the Irashimian people or the Shokokian people are like, hey, we are just a peaceful nation pretty much that want our Danseki, and you're stealing our Danseki, so we also want it. But like here, we clearly see that these guys have demands that they want to make as the former Mikaboshi. The whole idea of like, hey, we want Chiba, or no, first off, we want Irashima, we want the Danseki you have because we want all of it, and then we also want areas around southwestern Japan, or I'm sorry, southeastern Japan, where we could find more Danseki eventually. And like, how does Danseki just appear? Like, how do veins just come out of nowhere? Like, this chapter has so many questions, and I feel like the more I talk about it, the more I am going to be left here going, yeah, I just have more questions to answer, and I want to read next chapter even more, pretty much, right? But at the end of the day, hey, this chapter taught me about 2 new things in the world, pretty much. The style of ukiyo-e paintings, which is just so cool that Hokuzono was like, I'm going to draw one of these and have it be part of my story. I mean, it has the look of one of these old paintings as well. Like, it's replicated almost perfectly to what these old paintings look like, which I think just makes it even better. And of course, at the end of the day, what an aiguillette is. And man, it's just so cool. Like, I've seen that rope thing my entire life, and now this Shokokian delegate has one. It's interesting stuff, man. But with all of that being said, thank you guys very much for watching this video on Kagurabachi chapter number 117. I think this is going to be a long one. I've been recording for, I think now 49 minutes, and granted, a good amount of that's going to be cut out of the final video, but even still, and if you want to check out all my other thoughts on the volume, or not on the volumes, I guess on the chapters that make up the volumes of this series, there'll be a playlist in the description box of this video, along with the end card of this video as well, where you can find all of my various videos on Kagurabachi, and also go to my YouTube channel. Maybe you won't mind subscribing. I've had a really good sort of like last few weeks here, and I just want to thank everybody who may be new to the channel or viewers who've been watching for a very long time. The growth on the channel has just been incredible over the past like honestly week 2 weeks as we have finally hit 400 subscribers, and almost in the blink of an eye we're already at 407, which is just absolutely incredible. Thank you all so very much for supporting the channel like you do, and if you have any thoughts about how I could be making this content better, or what you like, what you don't like, or anything like that, leave me a comment down below. Also, telling me what you guys thought about this Kagurabachi chapter as well, because man, it was just simply amazing. And with all of that being said, I think I'm going to catch you guys next time for Kagurabachi chapter number 118. Of course, this was Kagurabachi by Takeru Hokuzono, chapter number 117. I will catch you guys next time. And this will be Glowplasma, signing out. You're not telling me, I am so convinced that all of them have gills in some sort of like way, shape, or form. And the people we see who have gills are descendants of the Mikaboshi, and that is why they have gills. They are Shokokians. Yura is not a guy from Shokoku. I want to make that clear right now because he does not have gills. That is my humble opinion. This is Glowplasma out.